Hi, everyone, and welcome to SAG-AFTRA Foundation's The Business Program. My name is Arianna Davis, and I'm the Senior Director of Editorial at Oprah Daily. Before we're joined by our guest today, I wanted to let all of you guys know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation has been made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given over $6.5 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. If you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Now, I am so excited to introduce this virtual event for tonight. I'm here with some of the greatest Latinx creators in the business. I am so excited. And I kind of want each of you, because this is a bigger panel of people, to maybe introduce yourselves and what projects anybody watching this might know you best from. So Stephen, why don't I have you go first and introduce yourself and just where people might know your work from.
Hi, my name is Stephen Canals. I'm the co-creator, executive producer, writer, director of the FX drama series Pose.
Yes, love it. One of the best shows on TV. Gloria, you're next.
Hi, I'm Gloria Calderón Kellett. I was the co-creator and co-showrunner of One Day and director and actor on One Day at a Time, which had so many networks, who can count? And my new show, With Love, is coming to Amazon Prime this December 17th.
Whoop, whoop.
Ilana, why don't you go next?
Hello, I'm Ilana Peña. I am the creator, showrunner, director of Diary of a Future President on Disney Plus. Season 2 just dropped August 18th. Please watch it so we can get a season 3. And yeah, I'm supervising a CW drama that was just announced yesterday. So hopefully that goes to series called Hermanas with the fantastic Crystal Ferredo.
Amazing. I can't wait to see what happens with that. Eddie, you're up.
Hey, I'm Eddie Gonzalez, the co-creator, executive producer, writer of On My Block. And let's see, I was a co-writer of the feature film All Eyes on Me, the Tupac biopic. And our upcoming project is the On My Block spinoff, where I am the co-showrunner, co-creator of Free Ridge, coming to you guys sometime next year on Netflix.
Nice. Slight flex. I love it. And then Linda, you're going to go, and Marvin, you'll be last.
You're the best for last, Marvin. I'm Linda Yvette Chávez. I'm co-creator, executive producer, writer. What else did I do?
Director.
I directed this season. That stuff feels weird to say. Of Gentified with Marvin over here. I also am the writer behind the forthcoming Flaming Hot, directed by Yvette and Gloria, as well as I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter over at Netflix, being directed by America Ferreira. Yeah. Hello.
I am Marvin Lemus. I am the, the co-creator, co-showrunner of Gentified, along with Linda. Some would say the better half, but that's, I can't say.
I wouldn't say that, but okay.
Oh, well, that's not what I'm saying. But Gentified, a director, and executive producer. I'm Gentified.
I love
Comes
it.
out November 10th.
And the season 2 comes out November 10th. Please watch it. Add it to my list.
Listen, I'm watching the screeners because I get that early access, and I have already cried and laughed at all of the things. I have lots of thoughts. I'm a big fan. And I'm a big fan of all of the work of everyone on this. This is like a Latinx power call right now. Like, it's amazing. And I wanted to just start with first, and I kind of want to hear each of your answers to this question. How does one end up as a showrunner / executive producer of a show? How did each of you kind of land? If you could give like the quick 2-minute explanation of how you ended up where you are, because I think a lot of people watching this might wonder, I want to be, I want to lead my own show one day, or I want to get to that level of, or maybe you're an actor and you want to create your own show. What was each of your journeys? Who wants to go first?
I was so dumbstruck by how the narratives about the Latino experience were non-existent, and when they did exist were wildly stereotyped. And for years, I was just kind of like, why is there no one on TV that represents my family or me in any real way? So once you start investigating and you're like, oh, it's because those people are writing it and they don't know. So I guess if I want change in my lifetime, I got to find a way to write and tell those stories. And all of our journeys are really different, which is what's so cool about this. But I was, a writer assistant. I worked my way up the old fashioned. I'm the viejita on the panel. It's okay. I'll take it. But it was the old days where you were writer assistant and staff writer. And I was a staff writer for 44 episodes before I became a story editor. Like it was back in the day. And so I really valued from being in the dominant white spaces because I learned what to and not to do, so that by the time I was able to sit in the showrunner chair, I felt very confident. And I was very fortunate to have really wonderful allies in Mike Royce and Norman Lear, so that I could tell the story that I at least wanted to tell. And I could sleep at night thinking, well, there's at least one more that we're adding to the very few list of shows that are on here. So the fact that we all know each other because we are all in this fight together and have been loving and supporting each other behind the scenes. So it's just a pleasure to be able to sit here with this wonderful panel and see that, God, maybe is it changing, you guys? Is it changing?
I hope.
A little bit. I've been moderating this panel. I feel like when I first started out in journalism, I guess about 12 years ago, I remember there was maybe one or two showrunners who were Latino, and now I'm just like, wow, even to be on the Zoom right now is kind of dope. So I do think it's a positive, even though there's a lot more work to do, right? Anyone else want to share their story? Steven, why don't you go?
Well, first and foremost, I have to say thank you to Gloria for all of your work, because the reality is we all stand on your shoulders. So thank you. And I am a benefactor of the work of Gloria. So, I, like Glo, I put all of every fiber of my being into a pilot that I wrote in grad school called Pose. And then I went out into the industry and was told no a lot until I was fortunate enough to meet an incredible executive producer in Sherry Marsh. And she is the person who introduced me to Ryan Murphy and said, this is a story and this is a writer that you have to invest in. And so, unlike Gloria, I didn't go through the process of a lot of other Latin writers having to be in a room and sort of be overlooked by their white counterpart, white contemporaries. I sort of, if my career shoots and ladders, I went from a staff writer to a show creator in one fell swoop, and then got a tutorial on how to showrun sitting next to Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk. So I was really, really fortunate.
Ilana, tell us about your story.
I will all say this, but I also stand on Gloria's shoulders. And I remember when I don't even know if Gloria remembers this, when I was because I started out in the assistant path I worked on 5 different shows varying from non-scripted to period drama to sketch comedy. And when I was an assistant on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, I had a 15-minute phone call with Gloria, and I was like, and she believed in me and made me think that I wasn't crazy for even thinking that. And then A Crazy Ex-Girlfriend on CW was the last show I landed on as an assistant. And again, we all have such different paths, which is so cool to hear about. So much of it is timing, so much of it is luck, and so much of it is mentorship. And I was lucky in Crazy Ex that I had all 3. And I got in season 2 as their assistant, Aline Brosh McKenna and Rachel Bloom. Season 3, I was a writer's assistant and I wrote an episode with them. Season 4, I was a staff writer on the show, and that was the final season. So I really made it just in the nick of time. And then because it was such a nurturing, amazing room that really valued my voice and what I had to offer, they were very encouraging of development, which is rare for a staff writer. So I remember people were like, oh, is your boss okay with it? And I remember leaving to go to a pitch, and Aline was like, you can't wear that outfit without a necklace, and called costumes and got me a necklace for the pitch I had for Diary. So I had Diary of a Future President. I was pitching it around. I had bosses who were super supportive. And I was able, like Steven, to sort of shoot the ladders in and go from staff writer to show creator, and then learned how to be a showrunner by, with mentors like Aline and Rachel and Gloria. And then yeah, and that's where I guess we are today.
Since we're saving the best for last, can I go now, and then we'll leave the Hentified crew? So Gloria, if you're the viejita, then I'm the viejito here, okay? On this one, like Steven and Ilana, we had a similar thing. I have a writing partner, Jeremy Haft, and our first room we were in was Empire, and we were staff writers. And you guys, we were so low on the totem pole, we didn't have an office the first 3 weeks. So we were like sitting in a hallway. And then when we co-created, you talk about allies. For us, our biggest my two big allies, two big influences were Scott Rosenbaum, who hired us. He had written on The Shield, and he gave us a freelance episode on gang related. And that's how we broke into TV. And think about it these days. Maybe you guys are giving out freelance episodes, but it's so difficult to give someone a freelance. This guy took a chance on us because we were feature writers. So we got lucky there. And then the other person who had a huge impact on our lives was Lauren Unerick. Gloria knows her well, but she was the showrunner on My Block, and she's the co-creator with us of the show. She believed in us. And, in so many ways, she went to Netflix. And when we got the spinoff, she said, look, these guys are ready to do this. They're going to co-show run this. So you couldn't do this. For us, there was no way we could get to this point without the help of others, without having Netflix believe in us, without having Lauren believe in us and other people. And I will, owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude forever.
Team Hentified, you're last. Linda, you go.
Be going in the same order as before. It's like, cool. I think Gloria's shoulders are in a lot of pain because we all kind of are on top of her shoulders trying to do things. But also, I will say along the way, Gloria has been an incredible mentor to us as well since like our earliest days working on Hentified. But we had a pretty non-traditional trajectory. I'll talk about myself. Obviously, Marvin will talk about him. But I had gone to film school and I had my graduate degree in screenwriting. But went on a crazy journey all over the industry for many years, trying to figure out what to do with my life. But in that time, did a ton of producing, everywhere from KCT to digital. I had a company with friends, and we did a lot of digital content that allowed me to do a ton of wine producing and writing and directing. And in that process, I learned a lot about the entire process of filmmaking and making even digital series. Felt like a very cool microcosm of what eventually was the experience on Hentified. And then there came a point where I kind of gave up on the industry and I was going to peace out. And before I did, I gave it one more shot and I said, well, what I want to do is I want to have a show. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I didn't feel like I was in a position to start at the bottom. I had managed hundreds of people. I'd done a lot of work. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to have my own show and showrun it, but I'm going to put it in God's hands and see what happens. I know this does not sound as normal as everybody else. But then Marvin came into my life. And Hentified came into my life, and Macro did. And from that digital series became Hentified and came the show. And it became a crash course in show running and in creating. And so much of what I had learned along the way was very similar. There's only one way to do production and post-production and pre-production. It's just bigger crews, more people. I would say more headaches. The bigger it gets and the more people you're dealing with and the more people you're having to satisfy. So yeah, that was my journey, but I learned a lot. That was already 6 years ago, I think, that started for Marvin and I.
Yeah, similarly, I was working as freelance director, producer. We were coming from digital, before Hentified, our show's based on a digital series that Linda and I created, and I got to direct the series, the digital series. And my background was where I cut my teeth was in the digital space. And like Linda's saying, it's a place where we're cranking out things quickly. Trump said something yesterday, today, let's fucking ideate right now and have something that we can put up tomorrow. So we're moving so quickly and you're wearing so many different hats. And it is this kind of perfect training ground for what TV and show running is really, because you're not just thinking about the creative, you're also thinking about how is this going to be landing with the audience? How do we get those clips? You're figuring out how to market and produce and run this budget and do it cheap and deliver it on time. And so by the time we got to do the TV show, talk about shoots and ladders, I had never worked in TV before. My entire experience was in digital space. And then we had a TV show on Netflix. In the first season, we had a showrunner that came on and was able to show us, show us the blind spots and the learning curve of what are the main differences here in the TV space. And by we got into the second season, we felt fully ready to be Netflix, we'd like to do this, let us to run this show in this next season. And we had America and Macro fully behind us, and Netflix believed in us and gave us that opportunity to be able to do that. And so, in some cases, we totally cheated and we cut a lot of corners, if you want to look at it that way. No, just kidding. But I just think that digital space is what was the perfect training ground to getting to this, to being able to run a show.
I'm curious for any of you, because there's a good amount of us on this call, of you guys on this call, but there aren't a lot of Latinx shows. We're seeing often how many shows get canceled or don't get picked up or renewed. Do any of you feel pressure ever, because there are so few Latinx shows on TV or on streaming services, to get it right, to do it for all the to do it for all the gente, to make sure that you're like representing for everyone? And how do you balance that? Eddie, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I feel a lot of pressure. I have 117 first cousins. Believe me, they're going to let me know if the shit isn't right. So I feel a tremendous sense of responsibility to them, to, obviously to our people, of course, but, guess what? We're not going to get it right all the time. We're going to make mistakes. And I'm learning this after 4 seasons of this. We go back and I go, oh, there's some things that I would have done a little differently. But in terms of the pressure, I'm a huge baseball fan, and there's this baseball player who once said, pressure is privilege. And I will take that privilege any day, because I remember the days when my phone didn't ring. So yeah, I'm fortunate to be in this situation.
I love that. That.
First season, I'll speak for myself. I definitely felt a lot of pressure. And I know it's like conversations that Lynn and I would talk about, and just the enormity of trying to get this right. And there was a lot of that, especially because we were talking the show's about a specific neighborhood that's very vocal and very outspoken and very protective of the community and their story, and that we fully respected and we just really wanted to do right by them, like Boyle Heights, and then the community at large, of just being a part of the audience growing up and never fucking feeling like they got it right, never feeling like I'm seeing myself accurately represented. I'm yeah, I know what the void is that we're trying to fill. And so I think that there was a lot of that pressure. And then going into the second season, speaking for myself, going through 2020, going through the pandemic, being in that isolation, and then going into making the show, there was just something, I was just I don't want to have that. And I feel like I personally went through a change where I needed to approach this story from a very personal place, and from a place of just I don't want to think about the audience that way. I don't want to think about that pressure. I want to just tell this story and be intimate and be real and be vulnerable. And it was, I don't know, for me, it was such an incredible space to be able to work from, and the work that we produced in the second season, and from being able to go through that process in that way, was so gratifying. And it was so, it was just there was life-changing in a lot of ways of what we were able, but I felt like I was able to go through in approaching the work in that way, of letting it go and not worrying about it, because it was just I don't know. I know that as an artist, I need to say this, I need to tell this story. I just want to portray something real and vulnerable. And I think, and then I think about how I'm yeah, that's how I feel like white people get to do it all the time. And I just kind of want to approach the storytelling from that point of view of just letting it go, because I know, having done the first season, I was we killed ourselves trying to make sure that we were delivering and getting right. And there's still people that find the things that because we couldn't be perfect. And instead of letting it get to me, I was just that's fine. There's no way to make everybody happy. And so let me just do this thing that I need to do as an artist, and for myself, that I need to kind of say and get out. And I think it was a really gratifying experience, I will say.
Gloria, were you gonna, or Stephen?
Sure. I think that none of us can help. There's a pressure because there's so few of us, right? There is just a natural pressure. I think that the way to not lose your mind in that is to understand that we are just people, and we're trying to navigate through this process. And, I know that in order for all of us to be in these spaces, we still have even the overnight successes that you're hearing, the chutes and ladders, is still years and years of putting time and energy into this craft. So it's not like they're graduating from college and are handed a show. There's still so much sweat that was put in to defining story and to defining. And so I think that we still have to be model minorities in order to get a seat at the table, even if it's chutes and ladders, right? So that gives me hope. but it's an unfair, it is a privilege to Eddie's point. I love that quote, but it is also, we have to just be able to create and to be able to have the real privilege is to be able to do this without having to check so many boxes and to be able to just make the work. So I think that the moment that I tried to separate, really, I'll tell you honestly, more than thinking about the audience, I think about my grandparents and my parents. I think about the people who sacrificed and didn't know this language and left a country where they couldn't speak their mind and sacrificed things I will never be able to understand so that I could sit here and speak freely. So I think about them more than I think about anybody else, really. And I think that because we are 20 plus countries under this umbrella of Latinidad, and the American Latino story is so varied, all we can do is really speak our truth in the work. And that is going to, and if we do that well, it is going to reverberate in a way that means that more boxes can have people like us in them on these Zooms and in these spaces. So while there is, of course, we are making it to put, believe me, I have jokes with some of the writers, and Sierra and Alice and I joke a lot about like, oh my God, let's just go write for white people again. It was so much easier. Let's just go write on the white shows. It's so much easier because it's true. It's true. We don't have to think about it. This requires a different thing. We're bringing the totality of ourselves to this every single day. And it is sweat and blood and tears. But my God, when we can just do it and be in spaces and homes where they let us do it the way we want to do it, what we see as the benefit on the other side is a feeling that I don't think any of us can truly put into words. All of us have had people come up to us and say, your shows were the first shows where I saw myself. There's nothing that can replace that. So I think that's where we're all doing our part in different ways and hopefully making space for more in the future.
And before I go to my next question, did you have something you wanted to add?
The only thing I would add is that when thinking about identity and who you center, it's like we also have to think about the fact that we hold multiple identities, so in the case of like Gloria, Ilana, and Linda, like they're also women. I'm a member of the LGBTQ plus community. So when we're talking about how we center and who, we have to think about the fact that as intersectional beings, there are multiple identities that we're trying to account for. And I think, like Marvin, I had that experience coming off of the first season of Pose, where before we even debuted, I remember getting notes and messages from people who were like, oh, you're centering 5 trans women, cool. And it was like, what about bisexual folks? What about folks who are pansexual? And it's like, this one show can't be everything for all people. And so I think the reality is to me, it's really reductive to watch any of the shows of any of us on this panel and to call it simply a Latinx show. Like my feeling was always, this is a show about whatever the themes are: love, family, resilience, survival. We just happen to be centering Latinx people because those are the identities that we all hold, right? So we're centering the people that we know, the people that we love, the communities that matter to us. That's where our commitment is. But to call the shows that we all have created simply a Latinx show, to me, I'm not okay with that, because to me, it sort of dismisses all of the work that we all have put into creating these shows.
Well said. Absolutely.
So well said. I keep saying, I just said this recently on another thing. I was just like, why? I was like, we get put in the same box. I'm like, Latinx isn't a genre. I'm like, you don't put Broad City and Game of Thrones in the same box just because it's surrounding white or centering white folks. Like it's so mind-boggling, and it feels so, like you're saying, so reductive. I mean, you couldn't put it better, man.
So a lot of people who are watching this panel are performers, are aspiring performers, are, especially those who maybe have been hard hit from COVID and are trying to get their next gig. For you guys as showrunners, what would you say is kind of your process? What are you looking for when it comes to creating a cast? Is it just chemistry? What advice do you have for anyone who's like, auditioning and wants some words of encouragement from a showrunner on what they're looking for? Marvin, I see you nodding. I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, because I figured that question would come up and I was like, so I thought about it, and I feel like especially this season, we did this entire thing through the pandemic. And so it was all remote. It was all virtual. We didn't get to do anything in person. It was such an insane process, like only getting to watch tapes and not being able to be in the same room with an actor and see their thing and like see like how there's just something that you can feel in person that you can't really communicate over Zoom. But like I was like, what I wanted to share was just like, I was like, we're moving so quick. We have so many decisions to make. And I feel like the stuff that tends to stand out because we're watching so many tapes and like for one part, and we have to watch so many after, our casting director like, makes the first round of selections and they send it to us. I'm like, here's what I'm thinking, like, I'm really liking. And like, I feel like the stuff that I'm always like looking through and what I'm looking for, it's just something that feels very natural. It feels very like I'm watching a real person, right? Which I think is like, I don't know if that's too vague to say, but sometimes especially this season with all the tape, I was multitasking. So I'm just listening to the tape while I'm writing emails. And like, and it's kind of a thing that I picked up from like a rehearsal process. Like every now and then, like when I had the pleasure of being able to do rehearsals, which is not something you can do in TV. When you do rehearsal with an actor, sometimes I just would like have them rehearse the scene over and over again and just loop it. And do it over, and I'll go do something else. I'll write emails, and I just want to hear it and then like sometimes you'll start to hear the bumps of like where like, okay, you stepped out of being a person and now you're performing, now you're acting. And I just want to hear, it should feel like a coffee shop. Like I'm in a coffee shop and people are talking and they're just like not trying to do something. They're just having a conversation. And so I don't know how to make this very tangible, but I guess it's like trying to have that quality of not performing, of being in the moment, of being present, of being, I'm not trying, I'm not doing anything. I think that's the quality I'm always looking for in actors. Aside from that chemistry that you find and people that you just like can't help but watch, is just like actors that are they're just, I don't know, there's just like a naturalness to it. I'll moving on from that, I'll add the second thing I'm always like trying to hear is like, in a tape especially, is are you just waiting for your next line or are you listening? And I think that's a really important one that I see a lot of actors make is like, I can tell that you're waiting for your next line versus like actually listening and being in that moment and being in the thought process of like what this character might be thinking. And it's something that I think like immediately will disqualify somebody. I'm like, cool, next. Like I already saw it in the first 2 lines that you're not listening. And so I'm just moving on because there's just too many things to do. There's way too many meetings and too many phone calls and other decisions that need to be made to like, to that I can just like, I'll give it a couple lines. And if I'm like not seeing that listening, then I kind of move on. That's me, and I'm being just brutally honest. Y'all, please let me know. I'd love to hear what your guys' tips.
Well, what I feel like this isn't talked about as much, or maybe it is, and I'm just not on SAG panels. A thing that I think actors don't always, my roommate is an actor, and so I help her with self-tapes a lot. So I like see it from the other side, and I see where she's like she'll be like, oh, I messed up that line. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. Like that, you got it. And I think that what a lot of actors might not realize is a lot of times we as the writer, the showrunner, the EPs are hearing these words for the first time when you're doing that tape. And so we're like waiting to see if it works. Like, and maybe that's something that more esteemed and experienced showrunners are like not as like self-conscious, but like when I'm watching, especially when we were doing the diary pilot, and it was the first time I was hearing this stuff out loud, I was like, oh my God, I hope it works. I hope it works. I hope it works. And you want someone to be like, that's how, yes, like it works. You want to see how an actor can sort of take a line that maybe needs to go through a table read, maybe needs to go through like a rewrite or two, and how they deal with that. And I think understanding that you're also kind of part of the process and trusting that process, and not, like Marvin was saying, not trying to be this like polished, perfect performer, but just like how do these words feel coming out of your mouth? Because we're all, I mean, at least I am watching this and I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, okay, like that like one-liner joke day player thing, like totally works. Or like, I need to change that line, you know, but sometimes it's the actor's performance that helps me figure that out by just being as natural as possible, if that makes sense.
I like seeing the flaws, and it's weird. In some ways, it's almost like I want them to be authentic, but I know it sounds incongruous with someone who is acting, but sometimes they just bring this authenticity. I know like in season 3, we had an actor who came in and he did this thing with his eyebrow that was so creepy and it was so good. And we're like, that right there, that's it. And when I told him about that, he goes, what do you mean? I go, you do this thing with your eyebrow. He goes, I do. He didn't realize he was doing it, but it's so damn creepy that even just when he's not shooting, you're like, that's it. You're that guy. You embody him without even trying. That to me was one of those things I look for. And going back to Marvin was saying, yeah, I don't like anticipation. I don't like doing a line and then waiting to come back. To me, it's just such a turnoff. And unfortunately, you see it a lot in people that are just starting out. But if I can just say anything, it's just authenticity. Just be yourself, warts and all. If there's flaws, that's okay. Those imperfections actually make it perfect.
Yeah, I agree with all this. I think you want it to sound natural. You want it to sound like the best is when it's a table read and you're like, oh, are they going off script? Oh no, I wrote that. It just sounds so real. They just made it sound so real. Like you want it to be authentic. Even in comedy, I think people think comedy, they got to do a thing. And like, you just got to I think there's people that are funny that just bring their essence that's funny more than making the lines funny, I think that if you're not in class because you can't afford to be in class, then get on a Zoom with friends and read scripts out loud, because there is something about just keeping that muscle working so that it doesn't feel staged, so that it does feel really natural and lived in. Break down scripts, go through character thoughts, like make sure that is something that you are readily able to do, because also I still run, even though I did a 1 hour this year, I ran it like a comedy. I would fly in lines all the time and I needed those actors to be ready to go. And yeah, this was the first time I've done a pilot where all of our casting, even our chemistry reads were on Zoom, which was crazy because you want to see the people together. But there was something really kind of magical to see, wow, if they can have chemistry over Zoom, then I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. But it's just wanting it to feel lived in and to feel. And it's funny that also, Ilana was saying if they mess up the line, I'll say if they mess up the line and they're good, it's okay. Mm-hmm. But if it's not, then you're like, they didn't get that line right. Like it's almost like you can't show that you messed up. If you're going to, and for me, I'm okay with you improving if it's a button at the end. If you're adding a button at the end, I'm okay with that. But if it's like not what I wrote, that's a problem. Like there have been some auditions where I was like, this is a different script. What is this? Not like an and is a but. Like there were words coming out that I don't know where the hell they came from. Don't do that. But I think the self-tape is it's a great opportunity for people to at least turn in their best, which when you're live as an actor, when you're live, sometimes you don't know what they're going to send. So at least you can put forth the thing that you think is best and let it go. But the more practice that you have at just going through scripts, breaking them down, listening. We had a huge case this year where there was a girl where there was a part that was simply cast. We were going so fast. That's the thing, so fast that of the 10, I think they sent me 10 girls, and every girl was like, I know. Totally. Like they died in between the lines. Every single one of them. I was like, I'll just take, if any of these girls listen, I'll do it. And then there was one girl that just stayed like this to the camera and she got hired. The camera's on you when you're not talking a lot. Reaction is a big part of what we do as well. And I think actors do forget that. So say in those scenes, practice. If you can be in class, be in class. This is a muscle. This is a muscle and a craft. So if you can't afford it, there are ways that you can do this for free with your friends. I did it for years where we would just go get a bunch of plays from the library and read them out loud together just to stay in, get that muscle flexing.
Gloria, I just have I need to speak to the reactions. Like, that's what I mean. Like it especially in comedy, it's like, I need to know that I can cut to you, that you're going to give me something between the lines to cut to. Yeah. That'll be like, cause the reaction is always like, most of the laughs are in that reaction. It's not in the line itself. It's in that reaction to the line. Yes. And like, if you're not giving me stuff to cut to, then like, nah, I'm sorry, moving on. So it's so huge, those reactions, man.
So my last question before I let you guys go, I know we've acknowledged, I feel like there has been some progress we've seen a little bit, but I'm curious to hear from each of you what you hope to see change or what you think needs to change. I feel like there's always a lot of emphasis on us as creators of color to be like, oh, well, you need to open the door, you need to create the shows. But I think that there needs to be more conversation about like what else needs to happen from people who, you know, maybe aren't Latinx to open these doors and to create more to get more of these projects greenlit. So curious for any of you guys if you have tangible things that you would like to see happening more in this industry.
Yeah, more money.
I was about to say the same thing.
I think like when we say open doors, we're not saying give us charity. We're saying open doors and give us the equal access and power that you're giving white people and other people in privileged positions. Like, it's not enough to just give us the opportunity. You have to give us the ammunition, the tools, the same tools you've given everyone, the same amount of money, if not more, to do the things we need. Give us the marketing budgets that we need to get these shows out there to the people that it needs to reach. Because you have to remember, these institutionalized racism, white supremacy, classism, all of these things, they still exist even for television. Even if you have an algorithm, even if you have anything, there's extra layers to everything. So it's not only, we can't only just rely on, what works for other shows sometimes. Sometimes we're having to overcome obstacles that are invisible to us or invisible to you as a person who's greenlighting shows or marketing or putting them out there. So I think all of that to say that, like, you need to equip us with the resources we need to push forward, because we're all already exhausted getting shows like ours on the air, right? It's already, or on whatever platform it is. We're exhausted. We're constantly fighting battles that people don't often see. We don't parade those battles around because we're trying to get work in the future. So, we're already tired. So on top of that, to then have to fight for the resources and the access to get that content, this creative content, this artistry out to the world, to audiences it needs to reach, we shouldn't be fighting even more battles at that point. So show up for us from start to finish, all the way through to the end. And then again, for the next season, do everything you gotta do to show up for us. And I think that's probably the next step for so many of us in so many of our series, to be able to have that equal opportunity and access that so many shows automatically get because of an unconscious bias that's assuming that they're already going to be successful. And it is very unconscious sometimes. Sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it, that you're seeing a show as a potential success because of who's created it or who the people in the show, what they look like. Those are all things that we're having to battle. And I think that has to be taken into serious consideration as we're moving forward in this direction, because there's so many things, so many great things happening, all of us on this Zoom, right? Like we were saying earlier, is huge, but we're not going to last long if we're exhausted and breaking our backs to do it. Like our people have been doing that for generations. Let's change the narrative.
We really need white allies to care. And my constant conversation with the industry is, how can I make them care more? Because I think that all of us are processing. I've had many conversations in spaces, especially because it was Hispanic Heritage Month, the one month that they care about us. We get to talk on a million panels. So I'm talking every day about my Latinidad, which I'm happy to do. But boy, I wish it was this much throughout the year, because I do feel like we are all living through not only a global pandemic, but a wokeness and a seemingly maybe fake white wokeness that occurred in June, where people were posting and people were giving to BLM and people were caring about Latino issues and talking about DEI programs. And then it's worse now than it's ever been, from what I'm hearing, what I'm hearing of people selling, what I'm hearing in the nonprofit space for Latino causes, down. Everything is down, because it's almost as if people are like, we did it. We read that article. Racism is bad. Back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Well, it's like a hurricane, and then everybody leaves.
And then everyone leaves. So it's like, how do we keep people, like, even this panel, there's nobody that has a show here that's a mediocre show. These are all shows that on Rotten Tomatoes are high. These are excellence. And that's the only way we've survived. We can't even be mediocre, right? One day I just wanted to make a little mediocre show. But it's excellence. It's excellence because, and these are all shows in their third and fourth season. Wow, I wish there were more shows we could talk about right now that had a first season going into their second season. There's not a lot right now. So it's, how do we, it's like they see us and go, oh, well, we did it. Look at this panel. But these shows are, Eddie's show just ended. Steven's show just ended. My show ended. So we've got to, how do we make the wave continue for the next batch? How do we keep people talking about it? Because these are all varied stories, such varied experiences, and we have so much more to share. So I think it's about really having these conversations in a real way. I mean, today alone, I've had 3 conversations where I'm like, I need you guys to not be lazy white people. I need you to do as much work as I'm doing, because I don't have the luxury to be lazy for a minute. All I want is to be lazy. Help me be lazy.
Can I add to what you're saying? The other thing is, and I agree with you about the white allies, and we've been fortunate to have some white allies, but I will tell you this, I would love to be able to walk in a room and have studio execs that look like us. That would be nice, specifically people of power. Mm-hmm. How awesome would it be to have that? As opposed to you walk in the room and it's just, think about how many rooms we walked into where we are the only people who can say something in Spanish. Yeah. So that, to me, that's one of those things. And then the other thing I would love to see with buyers is, I don't want you to buy a show because you have to check off a box. Well, we've got our Latino show. Don't do that, because we want to get our shows made. Listen, everyone's stoked to get a pilot fee. We want the show made. So don't do it to check off a box. Do it because you believe in the story, and because the story may be specific, but it's also universal. And every one of us here has specific stories that have this universal appeal. So that's what I want them to do.
Yeah, it's going back to what Stephen said earlier. We make shows. They happen to be centered on Latinidad, but we're making shows that are real different. All of our shows are really different, and how wonderful. Let's do more.
And I wanted to just add 2 things. I think one is whenever I hear a version of this question asked, immediately I always go to having a more macro view on it, because I think that, like last summer, Gloria, along with Tania Saracho, who created Vida, who's fabulous, worked really hard with a bunch of other Latinx creators,
Ilana,
Linda and Ilana, and lots of other people to craft this really beautiful letter to tell Hollywood, hey, here are all the things that we need. And that letter went out. So I feel like we have been shouting from the rooftop for quite some time now, saying these are the things that we need. And so to me, the more macro view is to say, look, Hollywood operates in the same way that our country does. And so as opposed to being hyper-focused on, not that we shouldn't be hyper-focused on the resources that we as the creatives need right now, but I'm also thinking about, like, Marvin was talking about Boyle Heights earlier. I'm thinking about growing up in the South Bronx, and there are still people who are living in those communities now who don't have resources, who don't have access, who probably have never held a camera, who know nothing about editing because maybe they can't afford the software or they can't afford Wi-Fi. So it's like, for me, I'm thinking, I want to connect with like those young people who have a dream and feel like that dream isn't for me because I'm not seeing people like me who have access to create content. Like, that's important. And then we can get to the place where, like Eddie pointed out, those young kids are then going to be the president of a studio or a network in 20, 25 years. So I think we have to start thinking about the long con as opposed to just right in the immediate, which I think is important, but we've been doing the work in the immediate. And as Gloria pointed out, we're not seeing a lot of progress. So that's one thing. And then I think the other piece that's important for me is that I think that and maybe it starts with us, I don't know the answer to this, but I think we need to start making a distinction between Latinx creators and Latinx content. Because I think historically what we've seen is that the industry is really focused on Latinx content, which Latinx or Hispanic, whatever term you want to use, really is just a catch-all umbrella term that we know doesn't really mean a whole lot because the diaspora is so much more beautiful and there's all this diversity within Latinidad, right? So for me, it's like, do I want to see lots of Latin content or content that's specifically, very culturally specific? Sure. But at this point, it's like thinking about this panel and the number of Latinx creators that I know and the fact that we probably all collectively know each other and can count those on 3 hands is a problem. And so for me, I'm like, let's just get more Latinx people in first. You know what I mean? Like, because the reality is all the Latinx creators, if you really think about it and deconstruct it, we're all creating content that is super Latin. And the reality is like, why are we not given the same room to also create, genre shows, to create horror, to create action, to create sci-fi. Like, that has not happened. And so I think, I suppose it starts with us to say, hey, like, give Linda the opportunity to create a really incredible, horror sci-fi, you know what I mean? And if that happens to center Latinx voices as well, that's great. But I think, like, we need to put value in having Latinx folks behind the camera creating content as much as we're hyper-focused on what's happening in front of the camera.
Thank you to each of you so much for sharing your passion and your craft and the insight for anyone watching. On behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, thank you everyone for tuning in and all of you for your time. And I can't wait to see what's next for all of you, whether you have shows on right now or new shows coming, like all of the things. It's so exciting. So thank you so much for your time tonight, and I'll see all of you guys hopefully soon.